The small workshop was quiet, the hum of tools and machines filling the air, interrupted only by the soft clink of metal against metal. Zane Hunter, a mechanic by trade, sat hunched over a broken piece of machinery, his hands stained with grease and sweat. He had been working in this workshop for years, fixing everything from small gadgets to large, complex engines for the people who lived on the outskirts of the galaxy. His reputation was simple. If something was broken, he could fix it. It wasn't the most glamorous job, but it was his, and he took pride in it. Zane didn't need anything more than a steady paycheck in his work. The world around him was often harsh, the skies of the mining colony darkened by constant storms, but in his shop, things were predictable. Machines were simple. Problems had solutions. That was until one fateful evening when the door to his workshop opened with a creak. The storm outside raged, sending lightning streaks across the sky, but in the dim light of his shop, Zane barely noticed. He looked up to find two figures standing in the doorway, tall, cloaked in dark fabric and dragging something enormous behind them. Zane's heart skipped a beat as he saw what they were carrying. A dragon. It wasn't like any dragon he had ever seen or heard of. This one was pale, almost ghostly, with smooth, white scales that seemed to shimmer even in the low light. Its large wings were bent at unnatural angles, and it lay motionless, a deep, unsettling silence surrounding it. Its eyes, wide and almost glowing with a faint, eerie light, were closed, its body unmoving. Zane stood up, unsure of what to say or do. The two figures didn't speak at first, but one of them, a man with sharp features and cold eyes, nodded toward the dragon. "This is Artemis," the man said, his voice deep and calm. "It's alive, but barely." Zane's mind raced. Artemis? The name sounded familiar, almost like something from an old myth, something he had heard as a child. Dragons like this one were long thought to be extinct, their kind lost to time and space. The bounty hunters, as Zane now guessed they were, placed the dragon gently onto the workshop floor. "Can you fix it?" the man asked bluntly. Zane's gaze turned from the dragon to the man. "What do you mean, fix it?" he asked, his voice shaky despite his attempts to stay calm. "It looks injured badly. It's paralyzed," the man explained, his tone flat. "Damaged by an energy weapon in a raid. It cannot move and it needs your help. We've heard of your work. You fix things. We want you to fix this." Zane's heart pounded in his chest. He had fixed machines before, engines, drones, mechanical limbs, but a dragon? He wasn't sure he even believed in them anymore. The creature in front of him looked like something from a storybook, yet its presence was undeniable. The air around it seemed to hum with a quiet power, as if it had been waiting for something or someone to awaken it. "I'm no expert on dragons," Zane said slowly, eyeing the broken creature. "But I'll try." The man nodded. "Good, we'll leave it with you. But don't take too long. We'll be back in 3 days. Do not fail us." With that, the two figures left, leaving Zane alone in the workshop with Artemis. The door slammed shut behind them, and the soft hum of the shop returned. Zane stood still for a long moment, staring at the dragon. The creature's body was an extraordinary thing, its sleek white scales smooth and almost glowing in the dim light of the workshop. Its wings, large and majestic, were damaged beyond repair in their current state. Zane could see the mechanical damage, the sharp burns where the energy weapon had struck, the jagged edges of broken bones, and the odd angles of its limbs. This was no ordinary creature. Its bones were unlike anything he had ever seen, made from a material so strong and light that it barely seemed real. He took a deep breath, pulling himself together. Zane had seen worse. He had repaired worse. But something about this, about Artemis, felt different. He crouched down beside the dragon, his fingers brushing lightly against its scaled skin. The warmth of the creature surprised him. Despite its paralysis, there was life within it. He could feel the faint heartbeat, the slow, steady rhythm of a creature that had once soared through the skies. The thought struck him deeply. This dragon, once so powerful, was now reduced to a broken shell. Zane wasn't sure what to do next. He had no idea how to repair such a creature. But he knew one thing: he couldn't just let it sit there. He had to try. He spent the next few hours inspecting Artemis's body, studying the injuries and trying to come up with a plan. His workshop was filled with machines and tools, most of which weren't meant for biological repairs, but he would make them work. Zane was a mechanic, after all. He was used to working with what he had, As he worked, he began to talk to Artemis. It was a strange habit he'd picked up over the years, speaking to machines as if they could understand him. It always helped him focus. He wasn't sure if the dragon could understand him, but something about the creature's silent, unblinking gaze made him feel like it was listening. "You've been through a lot, huh?" Zane muttered as he carefully worked on the dragon's wings, applying the first layer of synthetic fibers to the breaks in the bones. "You've been through hell and now you're here. Just waiting." Zane paused, looking up at the dragon's face. The pale eyes seemed to shimmer faintly as though it could hear him, or perhaps it was just the light playing tricks. "Well," Zane continued, "I'm not going to leave you like this. I'll fix you. I don't know how yet, but I will." As the hours turned into days, Zane continued his work. He replaced the broken bones with strong, lightweight metal that mimicked the structure of the dragon's wings. He used his mechanical tools to craft new joints and muscles, repairing what was broken and adding new elements that could restore its movement. He wasn't sure if it would work, but he knew he had to try. Each day he spoke to Artemis, telling the dragon about his work, about the world outside, and about his own life. In some strange way, he felt that Artemis was listening, maybe not with ears, but with something deeper. Zane knew that if he didn't finish the repairs soon, Artemis would never fly again. But little did Zane know, as the final repairs were being made, something was happening to the dragon. It wasn't just getting stronger physically, it was beginning to awaken in ways he could never have imagined. The days passed in a blur for Zane. What had started as an ordinary repair job had become something entirely different. Each time he returned to the workshop, he felt a strange sense of purpose. The dragon Artemis lay on the workshop floor, its massive wings still too broken to use, its body still frail from the injuries it had sustained. But Zane could feel it. Something in the air around Artemis had changed. There was a quiet energy, a pulse that seemed to come from deep within the dragon's bones. Zane didn't know exactly what was happening, but it was as if the dragon itself was feeding off the attention, the care, and the effort Zane was putting into its repair. It was a feeling he couldn't explain, like a quiet hum that filled the room whenever he worked on Artemis. He had already replaced some of the damaged joints with stronger materials. He had reinforced the bones in the dragon's wings with lightweight metal, carefully crafting each piece to mimic the structure of its original form. He had even started to work on the neurological damage, wiring new circuits into the creature's body to give it back some control over its limbs. It was delicate work, and Zane was proud of his progress. Every time he placed a tool down, he would pause for a moment, glancing at Artemis. The dragon's pale eyes would follow him, and though Artemis had not moved a muscle since Zane began, there was something deeply alive in the way it watched him. Zane sometimes found himself talking to Artemis while he worked, even though he knew the creature couldn't respond in the usual way. "You're a lot tougher than you look," Zane would mutter as he carefully worked on Artemis's wings. "I've never worked on anything this complex, but I think we're getting somewhere." One evening, as Zane was working late, something changed. He was fixing the metal tendons in Artemis's wings when he felt a sudden shift in the air. It wasn't the usual quiet hum he had become used to. It was a sharp, almost electric feeling, like the space around him had come alive. Zane froze, his hand still on the dragon's wing. He looked around, but there was nothing unusual. No flickering lights or strange sounds. But something was different. Then, slowly, Artemis's wings twitched. Zane's breath caught in his throat. He hadn't expected this, not yet. The dragon's wings had been immobile for so long, it seemed impossible that they could move now. The movement was small, a gentle flutter, but it was enough to make Zane's heart race. He pulled back and stepped away from the dragon, watching intently. Artemis's wings twitched again, this time a little more forcefully. It was the first sign of life he had seen from the dragon in days. "Zane couldn't believe it. Artemis?" he whispered, bending down to the dragon's face. "Can you hear me?" The dragon's eyes, which had been half closed, now flickered open fully, and Zane was struck by how intelligent they seemed. The pale blue irises glowed faintly in the dim light of the workshop, and Zane swore he saw recognition there. You're awake," Zane said, a mixture of awe and disbelief in his voice. "You're actually awake." The dragon's head shifted slightly, its gaze never leaving Zane's. A strange sense of connection passed between them, something beyond the simple mechanics of repair. Zane had always known there was something special about Artemis, but now, with the dragon's eyes locked on his, he could feel it. The creature was no longer just an injured being. There was power in it, power that was waking up piece by piece. Zane stood back up, unsure of what to do next. He wasn't sure if Artemis was fully aware of its surroundings or if it was just reacting instinctively, but there was no denying that something had changed. The air around the dragon felt charged now, like the workshop had become an extension of the dragon's body. Zane could feel the weight of the energy in the room, something almost cosmic. Over the next few days, the subtle movements continued. Each day, Artemis's wings became a little stronger, its limbs a little more responsive. Zane kept working, carefully tweaking the mechanical enhancements he had added. But the dragon was changing too. It was as though the repairs were not just physical. They were awakening something deep inside the dragon, something ancient and powerful. On the third day after Artemis's first movement, Zane noticed something that truly amazed him. As he was working on the dragon's back, adding new support to the spine, Artemis shifted again. But this time the shift wasn't small. With a sudden movement, the dragon raised its head slightly and its tail flicked once. Then, without warning, one of its massive wings spread out slightly, and a low, rumbling sound echoed from its chest. Zane stepped back, his heart pounding in his chest. This wasn't just a twitch. Artemis was waking up, truly waking up. Zane had been so focused on repairing the dragon's physical injuries that he hadn't thought about the creature's true nature. Its power, its spirit, its ability to heal. He had assumed that, with time, Artemis's body would heal, and the dragon would eventually be able to move again. But now Zane realized something much more profound. Artemis was not just recovering. It was reconnecting with something deep within, something beyond what Zane had ever imagined. The dragon was beginning to feel the pull of its true nature. Zane couldn't help but wonder, was he simply fixing the dragon, or was the dragon fixing him too? Later that evening, Zane returned to the workshop after a short break. He found Artemis sitting up, its head raised higher than before, its wings stretched partially out to the sides. Zane could hardly believe it. The dragon was breathing steadily, its chest rising and falling with each breath. The creature seemed alert, aware of its surroundings. There was even a spark of curiosity in its eyes, as if it was observing Zane, taking in the strange new world it was part of. Zane cautiously approached. "You're looking better," he said, smiling softly. "I think you're almost there." Artemis's eyes met his, and for a moment Zane felt something stir inside him. It was more than just a sense of triumph or satisfaction. It was as if the dragon understood him in a way that no one else could. And then, just as Zane turned to go grab another tool, a soft, almost imperceptible sound filled the air. Artemis's wings fluttered again, this time with more force. The dragon was trying to move them, trying to stretch them. Zane's heart skipped a beat as he watched the incredible creature stretch its wings for the first time in what must have been years. Without thinking, Zane rushed to Artemis's side. "You're going to fly again, aren't you?" he whispered in awe. The dragon's wings gave a small, tentative flap, and for a moment Zane thought he saw the faintest glimmer of a smile in Artemis's eyes. The days grew longer, and with each passing hour the bond between Zane and Artemis strengthened. The once lifeless dragon, broken and silent, was slowly coming back to life. Zane had never expected this journey to be anything other than a repair job, but now as he watched the dragon regain its strength, he felt like he was witnessing something far more extraordinary. Every day Artemis became more alert. Its wings, once shattered and immobile, fluttered with increasing power. The dragon's body no longer lay limp on the workshop floor but shifted and stretched, testing its strength. It was as though Artemis was remembering something deep inside, something ancient, something that had been buried beneath years of suffering and paralysis. Zane spent countless hours in the workshop, working tirelessly to complete the repairs. He fixed Artemis's broken joints, adding new support to the creature's spine, reinforcing the delicate tendons in its wings. His mechanical skills were put to the test, but he had never felt more determined. He was no longer just a mechanic repairing an injured creature. He was part of something bigger. Artemis wasn't just a dragon, it was a living piece of history, a being capable of powers Zane couldn't fully understand. One evening, as Zane worked on adjusting the final pieces of the dragon's wings, something happened. The air in the workshop shifted. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up. He looked over at Artemis, who was lying still as usual, its wings spread out in the dim light. For a moment, everything seemed to hold its breath. Then, without warning, Artemis's wings flapped. Zane's eyes widened in disbelief. The motion was so powerful that the air around the dragon rippled, as if the very atmosphere bent with the force. It wasn't a small twitch like before. This time it was a full, deliberate movement. The dragon's wings flapped again, and the workshop seemed to tremble in response. Zane stood frozen, his hands still on the tools he had been working with. He watched as Artemis raised its head, its pale eyes glowing faintly in the dim room. The dragon let out a low rumble, a sound that resonated deep within the walls of the workshop. Zane could feel the vibration of it in his bones. The dragon wasn't just healing. It was waking up to something greater, something beyond the physical repairs Zane had made. For a long moment, Zane couldn't move. He could hardly believe what he was witnessing. Artemis, the mythical creature that had been paralyzed, was now stretching its wings with a strength and grace that Zane couldn't fully comprehend. It was as if the dragon was tapping into something ancient, something buried deep within its very being. "Artemis," Zane whispered, his voice filled with awe. "What are you doing?" The dragon's wings flapped again, this time with more force, lifting its body slightly off the floor. The workshop seemed to pulse with energy. Zane stepped back, not wanting to get in the way of whatever was happening. But as Artemis moved, it became clear that the dragon wasn't just stretching or testing its wings, it was learning to fly again. Zane had seen the signs before. The way the air around Artemis seemed to shimmer, the way it had reacted to his touch, the way it had watched him with those intelligent, glowing eyes. He had thought Artemis was simply regaining strength, but now he realized it was more than that. The dragon wasn't just healing, it was beginning to reconnect with its true nature. The creature wasn't just a dragon, it was something ancient, something capable of controlling the very fabric of space itself. Zane's thoughts raced. He remembered the strange feeling he had experienced when he first began working on Artemis. The way the air had seemed to hum with energy, the way the ground had trembled when Artemis moved. It was as if the dragon's very existence was tied to the forces of the universe. And now, with each beat of its wings, it seemed to be tapping into that power. Artemis raised its head again, its eyes locking onto Zane's. The intensity in its gaze sent a chill down his spine. Zane had always been fascinated by machines, by the way things worked. But standing in front of Artemis, watching the dragon stretch its wings and harness its power, he realized that there was so much more to this creature than he could have ever imagined. Artemis wasn't just a machine to fix. It was a force of nature, alive, intelligent, and capable of bending reality itself. For a moment, Zane felt small in the face of that power. He had been so focused on fixing Artemis, so intent on completing the repairs, that he hadn't fully understood the significance of what he was doing. The dragon wasn't just a broken creature to be mended. It was a being whose very existence could shift the balance of the universe. But despite his awe, Zane knew that he couldn't back away now. He had come this far, and Artemis needed him. The dragon had trusted him with its care, and Zane wasn't about to abandon it. He approached Artemis slowly, keeping his movements calm. "You're something special," Zane said softly, his voice full of wonder. "I don't know what you are, but I'll help you. I'll get you flying again." Artemis's wings fluttered once more, and the room seemed to fill with energy. Zane felt the power in the air, but he also felt a sense of responsibility. He wasn't just repairing a dragon. He was helping a creature reconnect with something beyond what he could understand. The dragon's wings flapped again, this time lifting it a few inches off the floor. Zane could see the muscles in its wings rippling with power. The creature's body was starting to remember what it had once been. Zane stepped back, giving Artemis space to move, but he stayed close. He couldn't leave it now, not when the dragon was so close to fully healing. For the next few days, Zane worked side by side with Artemis. He wasn't just fixing broken parts anymore. He was helping the dragon unlock its potential. With each passing hour, Artemis's wings grew stronger, its movements more fluid. Zane could see the dragon's eyes light up with excitement as it tested its strength, stretching its wings wider and higher. The energy in the workshop was almost palpable now, as though Artemis's growing power was feeding off Zane's own determination. Then, one evening as the sun set behind the clouds, something incredible happened. Artemis's wings flapped once, then twice. It lifted its body off the ground, and with a powerful surge of energy, the dragon took to the air. The workshop's walls shook as the dragon soared toward the ceiling, its wings cutting through the air with a grace that Zane had never expected. The dragon flew, not just in the physical sense, but in a way that defied the natural laws of gravity. It moved with ease as though it was born to fly, born to soar through the stars. Zane stood frozen in awe, his heart pounding in his chest. Artemis was flying. The dragon was no longer broken. It was whole again and more powerful than ever. But even as he marveled at the sight, Zane couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. Artemis was no ordinary dragon, and its journey was far from over. The days following Artemis's first flight were filled with a strange sense of excitement and fear. Zane couldn't help but feel a deep pride in what he had helped accomplish. The dragon, once broken and silent, was now soaring through the skies, its wings powerful and graceful. Every day, Artemis flew higher and faster, its once crippled body now returning to its full potential. It was as if the dragon was not only healing physically, but was also reconnecting with its ancient self, unlocking abilities Zane could never have imagined. Zane spent most of his time working alongside Artemis, helping with the final repairs, but also taking moments to simply watch the dragon fly. There was something mesmerizing about it, the way Artemis moved through the air as if it was born to defy gravity. Every time the dragon flew, Zane felt like he was witnessing something magical, something beyond the realm of human understanding. But there was a part of him that couldn't shake the feeling that this peaceful time wouldn't last forever. He had heard the bounty hunters' warning, the ones who had left Artemis with him in the first place. They had made it clear that once the repairs were finished, they would be back to claim the dragon. Zane hadn't taken them seriously at first, but now, with Artemis fully healed, he feared their return. It wasn't long before his fears were realized. One evening, just as Zane was finishing up a minor adjustment to Artemis's wings, the doors of the workshop slammed open with a force that shook the walls. Zane turned around quickly, his heart racing. Two figures stood in the doorway, their dark, menacing figures silhouetted by the stormy sky outside. The bounty hunters had returned. Zane's eyes narrowed. He recognized them instantly, the same cold-eyed man and his silent partner from before. The man was tall, with sharp features that looked carved from stone, while his companion was shorter but no less intimidating. They both carried weapons, and their presence filled the room with a sense of danger. "Zane Hunter," the tall man said, his voice deep and stern. "We've come for the dragon." Zane stood his ground, his heart pounding in his chest. He had known this moment would come, but now that it was here, he wasn't sure what to do. He had grown attached to Artemis, and the thought of handing the dragon over to these ruthless hunters filled him with anger. He had promised to help Artemis, and he wasn't about to break that promise. "I told you before," Zane said, trying to keep his voice steady. "I'm not giving it back." The bounty hunter's eyes flickered to Artemis, who was perched on the far side of the workshop, its wings outstretched, its eyes locked on the intruders. Artemis didn't make a sound, but the air around it seemed to crackle with tension. The dragon, though calm, was clearly aware of the threat. "You don't have a choice," the tall man said, stepping forward. "We've been patient, but that patience is running out. We've come for the dragon, and you will hand it over." Zane's mind raced. He had no way of knowing what these bounty hunters would do if they got their hands on Artemis. They had already shown that they were willing to do whatever it took to capture the dragon. Zane couldn't let that happen. "I won't let you take it," Zane said, his voice hardening. "Not while I'm here." The bounty hunter's eyes narrowed, and he took another step forward. Zane could feel the tension rising in the room. He had never been a fighter, never been someone to stand up to this kind of threat. But he knew one thing for sure. He couldn't allow these men to take Artemis. Not after everything they had been through together. Before he could say anything else, Artemis moved. In an instant, the dragon was on its feet, its wings flapping with such force that the workshop shook. The air seemed to ripple around Artemis, and Zane felt the ground beneath him tremble. He watched in awe as the dragon moved toward the bounty hunters. Its eyes locked on them with an intensity that sent a shiver down his spine. The bounty hunters stepped back, clearly surprised by the dragon's sudden movement. Artemis wasn't just a broken creature anymore. It was a force to be reckoned with. "Stay back," Zane warned, his voice shaking slightly. "I won't let you hurt it." The bounty hunters hesitated, but only for a moment. They had come for Artemis, and they wouldn't leave without it. The tall man's hand went to the weapon at his side, and Zane's heart skipped a beat. He wasn't sure if Artemis was strong enough to fight these men, but he couldn't just stand there and do nothing. "Artemis," Zane called, trying to get the dragon's attention. "We have to stop them." The dragon's eyes flickered toward Zane as if it understood. For a split second, the two shared a silent connection, an understanding that transcended words. Artemis moved with lightning speed, its wings creating gusts of wind that sent the bounty hunters stumbling backward. The dragon roared, a sound that seemed to shake the very foundation of the workshop. The energy in the room was overwhelming, and Zane could feel it in his bones. The tall man raised his weapon, but before he could fire, Artemis lunged. With a powerful flap of its wings, the dragon sent the man flying across the room, crashing into the wall with a sickening thud. His weapon clattered to the floor, useless. The shorter bounty hunter reached for his weapon, but Artemis was already on him. The dragon moved too quickly, its claws swiping out to knock the man's weapon from his hand. With a roar, Artemis pinned the man to the ground, its wings spread wide, casting a shadow over him. Zane watched, wide-eyed, as the bounty hunters struggled beneath the dragon's weight. The fight was over almost as soon as it began. Artemis wasn't just healing. It was stronger than Zane had ever imagined. The two bounty hunters lay on the ground, breathing heavily, clearly stunned. Zane stepped forward cautiously, still trying to process what had just happened. Artemis didn't attack to kill. It was simply defending itself. The dragon's presence was enough to send the hunters into retreat. "You're lucky I don't kill you," Zane said, his voice low and threatening. "Now get out." The bounty hunters scrambled to their feet, fear evident in their eyes. They had underestimated Artemis, and now they knew better. "We'll be back," the tall man growled, his eyes never leaving Artemis. "This isn't over." Zane didn't respond. He didn't need to. The bounty hunters turned and fled the workshop, disappearing into the storm outside. As the door slammed shut behind them, Zane let out a long breath, his heart still racing. He looked over at Artemis, who had returned to its resting spot in the corner, its wings folding gently against its back. "We did it," Zane whispered, a smile tugging at his lips. "We really did it." The storm outside raged on, but inside Zane's workshop there was a strange sense of peace. The two bounty hunters had fled, and Zane stood still for a moment, listening to the sound of Artemis's breathing. The dragon, once broken and silent, now seemed like an unstoppable force, its strength, its power, its ancient energy all coming back with each passing day. Zane couldn't help but smile as he looked at the dragon, who was now fully recovered. Artemis sat calmly in the corner of the room, its large wings folded neatly against its body, and its glowing eyes fixed on Zane with an almost knowing look. It was a strange bond that had formed between them. Zane, a mechanic who had once only fixed machines, and Artemis, a creature of legend, ancient and powerful. But now, as the storm raged outside and the threat of the bounty hunters seemed to have passed, Zane knew something more was coming. He had always known that Artemis wasn't just a creature to be fixed. The dragon was something far greater, and Zane had been part of its journey to reclaim its power. But what did that mean for the future? And what dangers still lay ahead? Zane shook his head, pushing those thoughts aside for now. There was something more important at hand, something that had been in his mind since the moment Artemis had started flying again. The dragon was ready. "Artemis," Zane said softly, walking toward the dragon, "it's time." The dragon's eyes flickered, and its head tilted slightly as though it understood. Zane had repaired it, healed it, and now the dragon was whole once more. But there was more to this than just physical repair. Artemis had always been more than just a creature with wings. It had been a guardian, a force of nature, capable of things that even Zane couldn't fully understand. Zane took a deep breath and stepped back. He had spent so many hours working on Artemis that it had become a part of him, a connection he couldn't ignore. He had seen the dragon's power and grace, but now it was time to see it fully realized. Artemis rose to its feet, stretching its wings wide. The dragon's massive wingspan filled the workshop, and the air around them seemed to tremble. Zane could feel it, an energy that vibrated in the walls, in the floor beneath his feet, and deep inside his chest. It was a power beyond anything he had ever experienced. The very presence of the dragon seemed to bend the space around it, like the air itself was alive, responding to Artemis's awakening. The dragon looked at Zane one last time, its eyes locked onto his, a silent understanding passing between them. There was no need for words. Zane had helped Artemis return to its true form. Now it was time for the dragon to soar once more. With a powerful flap of its wings, Artemis lifted off the ground. The workshop trembled, and Zane braced himself, stepping back quickly. The dragon rose higher and higher, its wings cutting through the air with such grace and force that the very atmosphere seemed to ripple. It was no longer just a creature in Zane's workshop. It was something larger than life, something capable of shaping the world around it. Zane watched in awe as Artemis ascended, its pale, glowing wings slicing through the air. The dragon didn't just fly, it seemed to bend the air around it, creating trails of shimmering light in its wake. It was as if Artemis was weaving through the very fabric of reality itself, soaring higher with each beat of its wings. Zane couldn't help but feel a sense of awe and wonder as he watched. Artemis wasn't just flying, it was flying. It was returning to its true nature, its purpose as a guardian and a force of nature. Zane had known that Artemis was powerful, but seeing it like this, soaring through the air like it had done countless times before, was beyond anything he could have imagined. The dragon circled the workshop, the air growing heavier with each flap of its wings. Zane took a few steps back, his heart racing as he watched Artemis hover gracefully above him. The creature's presence was overwhelming, and Zane felt something inside him stir, something deep, something primal. It was as though he could feel the power of the dragon in his very soul. Suddenly, Artemis shot upward with incredible speed, piercing the sky like a comet. Zane's breath caught in his throat as the dragon disappeared into the clouds, leaving behind only the faintest trail of light. For a moment, the world seemed to stand still, the workshop quiet and still as the dragon soared into the heavens. Zane stood there, staring at the spot where Artemis had disappeared. The dragon had returned to the skies where it belonged. But Zane knew that this wasn't the end. Artemis's journey was just beginning. Outside, the storm clouds began to part, revealing a clear sky. Zane felt a wave of relief wash over him. The dragon had left the workshop, but it had also left something behind. It had left a piece of itself with Zane, something that no one could take away. But as he turned to look back into the workshop, Zane's smile faded. There in the corner of the room, a small, glowing device lay on the floor. It had been hidden under the dragon's massive wings, unnoticed during their time together. Zane bent down to pick it up, his fingers brushing against the smooth, metallic surface. It was a piece of alien technology, one that Zane recognized from his studies. It was a beacon, something that could send a signal across the galaxy. And Zane knew exactly what it meant. Artemis hadn't just returned to its true form. It had left behind a signal, a call for others to find it, to track it down. The galaxy would soon know that Artemis had returned, and that meant the bounty. Hunters, along with anyone else who wanted to use the dragon's power, would soon be coming for it, again. Zane clenched his fist around the beacon, his mind racing. He had helped Artemis find its wings again, but now it seemed like the real battle was just beginning. He couldn't allow anyone to take the dragon again. Not after everything they had been through. "I'll protect you, Artemis," Zane whispered, his voice full of resolve. "I won't let anyone hurt you." The future was uncertain. The galaxy was vast, and dangerous forces lurked in the shadows. But one thing was clear. Zane and Artemis were no longer just two separate beings. They were bound by a shared journey, a shared fate. And no matter what lay ahead, Zane would stand by Artemis, ready to protect it with everything he had. Artemis was more than just a dragon now. It was a symbol of freedom, of power, and of the deep bond between a mechanic and a creature of legend. The adventure had only just begun.